My brother proposed to my fiancé, his ex alerted my family, and I'm pissed off. So my brother Kevin, 29, used to date my fiancée Tracy, 27, about a year ago. They dated for a month in July 2022 before he broke it off, as he wasn't looking to settle down, but rather just got bored with the relationship. I lived out of state then, so I did not know he had been seeing anybody, let alone Tracy, until I met her. Tracy and I met at a bar when I moved back in August, and we hit it off great. She was soon the most beautiful and intelligent woman I ever met, and we saw each other a few more times before officially becoming a couple. Come December, I felt she was someone I wanted my family to meet, so I mentioned it would be great if we could meet at Christmas. My family knew I was seeing someone, but since I don't talk too much about my personal life, I never told them too much until I knew things were real. When I showed them pictures, they actually passed my phone around the dinner table. My brother Kevin saw the pictures and freaked out, calling me a Judas for dating his ex-girlfriend. He demanded I stopped seeing Tracy, but I refused. So when I asked Tracy about that time, she admitted they did date and told me all the details of how they broke up. Well, a few weeks went by, and Kevin finally stopped mentioning it, so I thought he got over it. So this year, for Tracy's birthday, I had planned a nice dinner with both our families and her closest friends, and that's where I proposed. Kevin freaked out again when I proposed and had a big reaction, but my sisters and I shut it down right away. This was just last weekend. Kevin had been pretty quiet about everything for the last 2 months, and I hadn't seen much of him, assuming he'd distanced himself from me, which I was fine with. But he invited Tracy and me over for a family dinner at his apartment, with my parents and sisters going too. I found this somewhat strange, but we accepted since everyone else was going. Dinner was nice, nothing over the top, and after a bit of small talk for maybe 30 minutes, we retired to the living room to continue the conversation. Kevin got up and said he had an announcement to make. He went on this long speech about how happy he was to have family around for a special moment, dropped down onto one knee, pulled out a cheap ring, and asked Tracy if she'd marry him. Tracy looked quite confused and uncomfortable and demanded that he put the ring away and stand up. My dad tried to stop him, but I got there first and punched him. I won't repeat everything he said, partly because I was too mad to even process it all, but he mentioned something about how he wanted to prove to me that Tracy wasn't really into me and that she just wanted to get back at him. Before things escalated further, my parents quickly stepped in and escorted me out, promising they'd handle him. It's been a few days and I'm still furious. I'm not sure what to do anymore, and I'm afraid Tracy might start having second thoughts about marrying me because of everything that happened. Any advice? Edit. Thanks to everyone for reading and responding. I've been going through the comments since last night and this morning, and some valid points were made. There's no real update, as the only people I've spoken to since that dinner are Tracy and my younger sister. I want to clear up a few things I've seen in the comments. First, Tracy and I are newly engaged, and it's one of those situations where we both felt from the start that we were in it for the long haul, even though it's been quick. I'm positive about her. Second, when we first met, I was the one who approached her, not the other way around. If she knew or suspected that we were related, I do not know. But once I found out she dated Kevin, I asked her, and she said she didn't have a clue. I've no reason to disbelieve that, but at the same time, how Kevin overreacted definitely raises some suspicions. Thirdly, I never knew she and Kevin ever dated when we first met. Kevin and I aren't close. We used to be, but then we grew older and started drifting apart. We didn't really talk anymore. Before I moved back, we only spoke on special occasions, birthdays. Tracy knew of my family but didn't know much about them until I was ready to introduce them to her when Kevin and she reconnected. I didn't get the sense that there was any remaining feeling between them. She didn't treat him like a stranger, nor was she extremely affectionate with him either. I had been told their relationship had only lasted a month. I didn't think I needed Kevin's approval to propose to Tracy, but maybe I was wrong in thinking that. I don't know. That aside, I will be speaking with Kevin this weekend to clear the air and find out what's going on. I never got his side of their relationship, which was my mistake for not doing my due diligence. If anything of note comes up, I'll update, but that's all I have for now. Then there were comments from people that I should be worried about what his family would think. Luckily, I haven't gotten much of that other than from my mom and a few aunts. They know me well enough to know this relationship means more to me than dealing with his disrespect, especially toward my fiancé. They would be wasting their time with that type of advice. As for Tracy, I don't think I would need to worry about her taking him back. She can't stand him, LOL. Update 1. First, I just wanted to thank everybody for reading and responding. It's been a busy weekend, so I haven't had a chance to respond to many people, but I did edit responses to some of the most common questions I saw in the comments of the original post. Again, thank you. I appreciate it all, even the criticisms. Well, to update things, I gave Kevin a call and asked him to come over to the place so we could chat. I told him that I'd prefer it if Tracy was there, but if not, that was fine. He agreed to see the both of us and hence came over to my place around noon today. It was silent for a few minutes before I broke the ice. I apologized for not giving him a heads up regarding proposing to Tracy, and I also apologized for hitting him. He said, no big deal, but appreciated the apology. I told him what Tracy had said about the relationship and the breakup when I asked her about it, and I asked him to confirm if it was all true. I basically told him that his reaction to everything had been extreme, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting their relationship or downplaying its seriousness. Kevin confirmed that their relationship lasted only a few weeks, and he ended it because he lost interest. I asked Tracy if his behavior was because he still had feelings or regretted ending things with her, and he admitted to finding her more attractive than when he last saw her. He said he didn't like seeing somebody that he had been with, however briefly, with his brother. He also told me that, as a man, I shouldn't have violated him by dating his old flame. I reminded him that I didn't realize they had ever gone out. Hence, I was not subconsciously aware of their past at the beginning of my involvement with Tracy. He just shrugged it off, said it didn't matter, and that I should have backed off anyway. He was adamant that if he was in my shoes, he would have done the exact same thing. But I'm not sure whether to believe him or not. I asked him why he would propose to Tracy if he did not have any remaining feelings for her, and he said he had been speaking to one of his friends, who was around when Kevin and Tracy were together. The friend suggested maybe Tracy had known from the very beginning we were related and was doing all of this to get back at him, considering she had hung up on him after they broke up. Kevin and his buddy thought they should put the theory to the test and see if their assumption was right. So, Kevin hit upon the bright idea of asking Tracy to marry him, to see if she would in fact leave me for him. Tracy asked him to explain why he thought she was still hung up on him, and he told her that he had heard she had been asking about him after the breakup and still hanging out at the places they used to go, which made him think it was a reasonable assumption. Then, when she showed up with his brother, it only confirmed his suspicions. She told him that she'd only asked about him once after the breakup and that she had been visiting those places with friends before she and I started seeing each other. She said she wouldn't avoid those spots just because of a breakup. She also told him she was offended by the idea that she would go as far as pursuing me just to get back at him. Kevin shrugged it off and gave her a half-hearted apology, but said she needed to see things from his perspective. Kevin asked Tracy if she really didn't know, and she told him that she hadn't realized the resemblance between us until we were in the same room and that we acted nothing alike, so it never crossed her mind. He accepted that explanation, and that pretty much ended the conversation. Before he left, he told me I could take him off the wedding guest list because he couldn't support our relationship knowing he had dated Tracy. I told him that wasn't necessary, since he was probably going to be uninvited anyway. Well, it's been a couple of hours since we last spoke, and I do feel better. My parents aren't happy about him not being invited, but they understand it was a mutual decision, and most likely the right decision. My sisters told me they knew he didn't have a valid reason for his behavior and didn't blame me for not wanting him at the wedding. For the time being, I intend to restrict association with Kevin and don't think he'll contact me anytime shortly either. I just wanted to thank everyone for reading and commenting, and I'll update you again if anything important happens. To answer a question in the comments, why didn't Tracy know about my family? We really didn't discuss my family at the beginning of our relationship. I had moved away from my family to get away from them, especially my parents. And I started getting back in contact when my sister kept urging me to. When I decided to move back, I was open with Tracy about not being close to them, and she was fine with not knowing much given the situation. I did both of these updates in the same thread, but for clarity, update 3 was done about 2 weeks after update 2. I have merged them here into a single post. If I had to guess, one of the updates may have been deleted or held in moderation on a subreddit, so I couldn't post it there. So instead, I'm posting this directly to my profile in case anyone is still following the situation. It's been a while since my last update, but a few things have happened since I last spoke with Kevin. I've kept low contact with him since our conversation. We haven't called each other, and we've only interacted in family settings. Now my mom's mad at me because Kevin wasn't invited to my wedding. It all started when my younger sister, Hannah, turned 22. We were at her birthday, and her boyfriend of about 4 years had just proposed to her at the end of the night, so we were sitting around discussing her dream wedding. She went on a bit about how she wanted a destination wedding and what ideas she had for the cake and dress. Then she dropped this bomb on me. "Teddy, I know Kevin's not allowed at your wedding, but you don't care if he comes to mine, right?" I brushed it off and told her I couldn't get upset about her guest list, even if I wanted to. Then my mom gave me this weird look and asked if Kevin was still uninvited to my wedding. I told her yes, and she got irritated. She told me she thought I was joking and told me I was being ridiculous for keeping him off of the guest list since he's family. She said I was holding a grudge just to be petty. I reminded her that Kevin and I had agreed together that he wouldn't come. I then told my mom it was not the right time to have a conversation about my marriage, and that the day was supposed to be Hannah's day. I told her that if Kevin or she wanted to talk to me about my marriage, they should contact me later. Hannah stepped in and scolded my mom for trying to make her day all about Kevin instead, causing my mom to let the subject drop. For those who were wondering, Kevin couldn't come to Hannah's party because he had to work and couldn't make it. A few days later, my mother visited my residence and expressed her desire to discuss the matter of my wedding. She inquired as to the reasons behind my steadfast decision to exclude Kevin from the event. Furthermore, she proposed that I ought not to harbor such insecurity regarding the prior relationship between Kevin and Tracy, contending that the decision to uninvite him was excessive. I told her Kevin and I had discussed it, and he wouldn't be invited, and if he had an issue with that, he could come to me in person about it. We ended up arguing about this, and she said if I wasn't going to re-invite Kevin, then she wasn't going to come, because I was picking on her son. I was nonchalant and said that if that was how she felt, she could throw her invitation away because I was not going to beg her to attend. She asked me if I was really okay with her leaving, and I reminded her it would not be the first time she missed one of my events because of Kevin. She accused me of bringing up her past mistakes and stormed out in a rage. Later on, I started getting messages and calls from my mom and some relatives about the situation, claiming that I was wrong and advising me to invite Kevin to keep the peace. In addition, my mom has been ringing Tracy, begging her to try to get me to take him back. To my knowledge, Tracy hasn't responded to her. Most of my maternal family members decided to take my mother's side and not go to the wedding. My father and his family, though, which consists of only my aunt, uncle, and their 2 kids, are being supportive and are still planning on coming. Also, my sisters and, of course, Tracy's family will be there. I had a discussion with Kevin about the situation and asked him if he had any issues about not being invited. He said that he was the one who first decided to remove his name from the guest list and is confused as to why people have given much importance to this issue. He said he still didn't want to go and told me to leave him out of the argument and that he'd say the same thing to my mom if she brought it up to him. At this juncture, I have reverted to maintaining frequent contact with my mother, but my father and I continue to be on good terms. I am presently weighing the option of inviting my mother or her side of the family again in case they change their mind about the wedding boycott, but that is a very remote possibility indeed. I've discussed this with my father, who has reacted sympathetically. So far, Tracy and I have begun researching downsizing the venue since the guest list has gotten significantly smaller. Update 3. My mother has now been officially uninvited from the wedding. About 2 weeks after her comment about not coming, she came over to clear the air and discuss all the relevant issues. We agreed to talk, and I invited her to come for dinner. Tracy plated something for her, and I asked her if she still wasn't planning on coming to the wedding. She wrote back to say that although she wished she could come, she couldn't forgive me for excluding Kevin, which she termed a foolish error. I reminded her that Kevin's supposed mistake was that he had proposed to my fiancé while standing less than 3 feet away from me. She brushed it off as just a joke. Tracy then asked her why she wanted to talk if her stance on the matter of Kevin coming hadn't changed. My mom admitted she wanted to speak to Tracy directly because she hoped she could convince me to change my mind about Kevin. Apparently, she assumed I'd be at work and planned to catch Tracy alone. Tracy responded really well, saying she understood where my mom was coming from, but wouldn't have had that conversation without me present since it involved my brother. That is when my mom said something out of line, acting as if Tracy was spineless and couldn't think for herself without me. The issue soon turned into a heated argument between the 3 contestants. Finally, Tracy told her to go, effectively ending the discussion altogether. When my mother got up to leave, Tracy approached the door to unlock it, but my mother followed her, continuing to raise her voice. She was now, in a loud voice, accusing Tracy of tearing our family apart. While Tracy was standing at the door unlocking it, my mother grasped Tracy's hair, jerked her to the floor, and continued her tirade. She hit Tracy and began to try to scratch her face, but I managed to intervene, grabbing my mom and hauling her outside. She was banging on the door for a good few minutes while I made sure Tracy was okay. After my mom finally left, she started calling us both in a row. Once I was sure Tracy wasn't hurt, I texted my mom and told her not to ever contact us again, because we're cutting her off for good this time. I promptly contacted my father and siblings to inform them of the events that had transpired. My father expressed astonishment and attempted to rationalize her actions by suggesting that she had been experiencing significant stress recently. In contrast, my sisters were unfazed and remarked that they had anticipated this reaction, as our mother had consistently exhibited tendencies toward dramatic displays of emotion. They volunteered to visit in order to assess Tracy's condition and provide us with support. When I asked Tracy if she was interested in pressing charges, she said no. Her only wish was to completely sever all ties with my mother for good and move on with her life. I told Tracy it was clear she did not want to press charges, but still, I think she should speak with the police since this was a physical assault. However, she's firm in not wanting to report it because she'd feel guilty if my mom were arrested. But luckily, my sisters and Tracy's mom came by to comfort her, so she's doing all right for now. For now, my mom is blocked on everything and I am leaving that in place until Tracy advises otherwise. Honestly, I do not know what the next steps to take are. Although Tracy does not want to get the police involved, my sisters and I think it is very important to at least make a report to get something in writing in case of anything happening in the future. Comments where I replied, "All of this could have been avoided if Kevin had taken responsibility and talked to your mom. It is certainly within his capacity to do so. However, I contend that Kevin lacks a proper understanding of accountability. I genuinely perceive that he does not recognize his influence on our mother's conduct. Regardless of my attempts to convey this, I am skeptical that he will ever admit that her behaviors are motivated by her attachment to him and her self-serving interests." Tracy is still against pressing formal charges, but after reading some of your comments with me and having a long conversation about how this situation could escalate, she agreed to have the incident documented with the police. She's also considering talking to my dad about possibly getting my mom back into therapy or seeking treatment for her erratic behavior. For now, we're moving forward with staying no contact. Clarification: background on my relationship with my parents. A few people have asked about my mother and why I don't want to talk about my fraught relationship with my parents to Tracy. I think it would help to give some contextual background. It is clear to most that Kevin filled the position of the favorite child. He was my mother's golden boy, something she did not try to hide. Unlike most parents, who share their affection equally among all of their children, my father and mother rarely spent time with my sisters and me unless absolutely necessary. They really catered to Kevin in a lot of ways, taking him on shopping excursions while making provisions for a sitter for us, or getting his favorite food and toys from the store while ignoring our possible wishes. This favoritism created a lot of tension in our family and shaped the distant relationship I've had with my parents over the years. Kevin would always get much nicer things than the rest of us. Although he received costly, brand new clothing, our clothes often came from thrift stores. He always got brand new toys that were his alone, whereas my sisters and I had to share older, hand-me-down toys. On the rare occasions that we received gifts, these gifts were for everyone's use in the family, but it was clear that any gifts given to Kevin were his alone, and we weren't even allowed to touch them. In cases where Kevin was having problems, I often suffered consequences for not being a good role model and teaching him the right behaviors. For example, when Kevin went through the phase of destroying his toys, I was blamed and punished because my mother said that I had taught him this behavior. One of the biggest injustices was when Kevin was 8 years old. He got in trouble at school for trying to shove another child down the stairs. Instead of him being punished, I was grounded for 2 weeks and forced to apologize to the other child on Kevin's behalf because I had supposedly not set a good example. When I turned 14 years of age, I started begging my parents to give me an allowance, but that seemed to be an even more difficult task in a household where it was clear that Kevin took priority. My parents finally agreed to give me an allowance. However, this was on the condition that I would do some household chores, such as cutting the lawn, emptying trash, and raking leaves, among others. I would usually get about $30 a week, which I was supposed to save. However, when Kevin realized that I was getting some monetary allowance, he pleaded with my parent to give him an allowance too. Rather than giving him chores, they paid him $15 of my allowance a week and told me that it was a reward for us both doing our chores, when in fact, he did nothing. Whenever I asked Kevin to help me with the house chores, he would decline my request, citing it was not part of his responsibilities, thereby calling into question why he should get involved. This was the starting point of my emotional detachment from my brother. When I entered high school, our contact was only when we needed something or when we needed something from each other. Having reached the age of 17 years, I got my first job in order to save up for my first car and make some money that my parents couldn't take away for Kevin's use. Then my elder sister Lucy helped me set up a personal bank account and taught me how to budget and save properly. This moment was quite a turning point in my life, since it provided me with a sense of independence and a first feeling of control over my financial affairs. When I was 18, I bought my first car, after hard work and saving up. When Kevin got his driver's license, my parents asked me to let him use my car so he could get more practice driving and also use it when I wasn't using it. After some hesitation, I agreed, and for a time this worked out well. He would occasionally take the car and even help maintain it. Eventually, Kevin made it known to my parents that he wanted a car of his own. My mother then came to me and asked me to give mine to him, since, according to her, he needed it more. When I refused to do this, she threatened to kick me out. After a bitter argument, I was forced to sign the car over to Kevin in a few days' time. I didn't have any other place to go at that moment, so I felt like I had no other choice but to go with it. When I graduated high school, neither of my parents attended the ceremony. Kevin didn't want to sit through a long, boring event, and my mom didn't want to leave him home alone. So the only support I had was my sisters, aunt, and uncle, who wanted to celebrate by taking me out afterward. However, my parents insisted that I return home because they had cooked dinner to make up for not being there. To my dismay, the food they had ready was inedible for me. My mom had put shrimp and chicken on the same platter, which I am severely allergic to shellfish. After graduating, I worked 2 jobs in a year and saved money to buy myself another car. It was tiring, but it felt good to get some of my independence back after all that happened. When the new school year rolled in, I packed up and went to college. I needed to sever ways with my mom and dad. For the first few weeks, my mom attempted to reach me, mostly through social media or by contacting my sister, Hannah. I disregarded her and threatened Hannah that I would cut ties with her too if she continued to pass on messages from our mother. When Hannah shut down her cooperation, my mother tried to reach out through my older sister, Amelia, and Lucy and Kevin. But I made a threat that if she continued, I would file a restraining order for harassment. I didn't actually know how to do such a thing, but the threat was enough to make her back off. After that, most of what I ever got from her over the years was the occasional "Happy Holidays" note. Around the time I moved back to my hometown, Amelia told me my parents had been seeing a family therapist, something Amelia had urged them to do, and that they wanted to apologize for how they treated us growing up. I was skeptical, but agreed to hear them out, provided their apologies would be sincere. That was the beginning of a long, slow process of reconciliation. That doesn't even begin to cover all the things they put me through, and it took a lot of effort on my part to consider letting them back into my life. By the time I met Tracy, I didn't know what the future of my relationship with my parents would hold, or if I would have one at all. For that reason, I avoided bringing up my family with her. I was ready to sever any relationship again with my parents if they gave me a reason, and I never wanted Tracy to feel trapped in between. Thankfully, she knew it was a touchy subject with me and never harped or pressed me for details. I hope this helps clarify some of the questions I've seen come up. As for why I didn't make reconciliation contingent on being reimbursed for the car, I just didn't think it was worth fighting over. The damage had already been done, and it wasn't a hill I wanted to die on. Even now, it's hard to wrap my head around the fact that Kevin was so obviously the favorite, not for any extraordinary quality or anything. I don't mean that as an insult. He was just a regular kid. My parents didn't have fertility issues. He wasn't some kind of miracle baby. There was no monetary gain, and they weren't using a kid to patch up a failing marriage. He was just born, and for whatever reason, they chose to love him more than the rest of us. Some of my siblings still defend my parents because they feel loyal. To them, even after everything that has happened, in their eyes, our parents are still flawed but redeemable. For those jokingly asking if I'm adopted, Unfortunately, no. I'm biologically theirs, as much as they might wish otherwise sometimes. Hannah. I used to make excuses for my parents, but after a while, I had to realize that they just weren't people who should have had kids. Update 4. I just wanted to thank all of those who took the time to give me some advice on what to do next, and for all of the kind messages and comments I have received in the last few days and weeks. Tracy and I read through them together, and we really appreciate everything. To answer the most frequent question as to why I chose to reconnect after everything, the short answer is that I would do anything for my sisters. Amelia wanted the whole family present for the arrival of her first child and to help her adjust to that. She did not want family members who just dropped in for holidays and birthdays. She never asked for much growing up, so when she asked me if I'd be willing to try and reconnect for her, I said yes, hoping it would make her happy. Part of me also hoped that things would change. I don't regret trying to reconcile. My parents are still terrible people, but I met the love of my life, so I consider it a win. Some people asked if there's an update. So, here's an update. I'm sorry if this is a little scattered or unclear. A lot has happened. We filed a police report, and they told us that even though Tracy doesn't want to press charges, it's not up to us whether it goes further, but they would take our wishes into consideration. We provided them with good evidence of the assault, such as pictures of Tracy's face and texts between my mom and dad regarding the incident. The police informed us to continue keeping a record and reporting any other incidents with my mom, just in case something else did happen. I don't think much will come of it since we live here, but at least there's something on file now. Later that evening, I received 100 irate messages from my mom telling me that at least she had spoken to her about what was happening. She tried to confront me outside of where I worked, screaming at me for trying to ruin her life. She kept saying over and over again that I was a terrible son for wanting to get her arrested over some small misunderstanding and couldn't understand what she had done to warrant this. I told her if she didn't want to get into a legal problem, she shouldn't have hit Tracy. She demanded that I tell the police to forget the report, but I refused. I told her exactly what the officer said, that it was out of my hands. She had a meltdown in the parking lot and hit me a few times, mostly on my chest and arm, before security stepped in and removed her from the property. I had to explain the situation to my boss, but luckily, she understood after I told her what was happening. When I got home, I filled Tracy in on everything and she was upset. She suggested we talk about our plans to handle my family moving forward. We had a long conversation, and after taking into consideration some things we had read online, we decided to have completely no contact with my family except for my sisters. We both agreed that they were just causing us unneeded stress in our lives, which is why we are not even married yet. Tracy said she wanted to think about moving away and distancing herself from my family. She said she's always tried to stay out of my family drama because it's not her place, but she can't tolerate my mom's behavior or my dad enabling her. There was a lot more said, too much to include here, but in the end, I agreed with her. My family was more trouble than they were worth. I also reached the point where I couldn't take this anymore. I finally agreed to seek therapy, and Tracy is helping me locate a therapist. After our talk, I felt I needed to call my dad and let him know I would be going no contact. He didn't pick up the first time, so I left a message asking to have a serious talk when he called back. He asked if it was cool with me for my mom to get on the call, and I told him yay, since she needed to hear what I was saying too. The actual call went pretty much how anyone would have guessed. I told them both that Tracy and I were taking them out of our lives. My dad wanted to know why I'd make a decision like this after all the work we'd put into repairing our relationship. I told him everything that happened with Kevin, and he showed me nothing was really fixed between us. To them, it seemed like the world only revolved around my mom and my little brother. I told them that their favoritism of Kevin had continuously brought our relationship to a point where it could not go any longer. I was not about to hold on to a failing relationship. I reminded them that I had agreed to try to work things out for Amelia's sake, but that I no longer put up with the disrespect toward Tracy and me. I told him I wouldn't take it anymore, for both our sakes, in particular when it became my mom. I told her that I was done being used as a scapegoat for her poor parenting and Kevin's attitude. I also told her that I could never forgive her for what she did to Tracy and for everything she did to me and my sisters growing up. She was starting to tell me to move on, just like my sisters did, but I cut her off and told her to take their forgiveness and move on because she would never get it from me, especially after all she's done these past few weeks. And she burst into tears and asked me how I could treat her as a wicked villain. I told her she had nobody to blame but herself, as I had done nothing wrong. She wept harder and told me she was sorry that she ever had me and that I had only tried to ruin her life. That resulted in an argument between her and Tracy. Tracy, in much stronger words, told her she was disgusting and called her plenty of other unflattering names for saying something like that to me. I have no idea if my mom ever left the room or just plain refused to talk anymore, but she never spoke again after Tracy was done with her. My dad said he wasn't okay with being shut out of my life, and he told me to try to see things from my mom's point of view. He told me how my mom was suffering since her kids were at odds with each other, and I wasn't fair because I was punishing her for the battles that are in raising and caring for us children. The last thing he ever said was, we were family, and I shouldn't allow past mistakes to hold up what we have and keep going ahead together. I told him the only person my mom ever really cared about was Kevin and herself, not him or anyone else. There wasn't anything he could say or do to change my mind. I told him it was his choice whether he wanted to keep my number, but that I was going to block him and Mom and never trouble them again. Then I hung up. Then I wrote a lengthy email, attaching a link to all my posts and inviting the remainder of my family to the wedding, except, of course, my aunt and uncle, and my sisters. I hadn't cried in a while, but Tracy held me as I cried after sending the email and told me we would be okay. My sisters contacted me after reading the email. I apologized to Amelia that I wouldn't be able to keep reconciling like she wanted, and she said it was okay and it wasn't my fault that I had to cut them off again. Reactions from my family have been very mixed. Some are mad that I aired out family issues on a public forum, while others are angry at my parents for never realizing how bad things really were. The last person I talked to about everything was Kevin. He then asked me if I was cutting him off, and I told him no, just wouldn't be going out of my way to contact him. He didn't argue and wished me the best with the wedding, and we haven't spoken since. Tracy and I are currently looking for a new place to live. We are moving closer to Tracy's brother, who lives about 3 hours away. Tracy and I really enjoy the city he is in. I spoke with my boss about transferring, and Tracy is looking for full-time remote work or a new job. Due to the smaller guest list, our wedding venue has changed, and my dad is now talking about us possibly using his lake house for the wedding. I don't plan on posting about this again unless something big comes up, at least not until after the wedding, because I just want to move on with my life. I will try and answer any questions you might have to the best of my abilities. Thanks, and happy holidays. Edit. This took a few days to put up as I had to take some stuff out before posting. Let me know if any of it doesn't make sense. I will answer as many questions as I can. To the comments about my mom possibly trying to track us down after we move, I am preparing for the fallout. She is one of those people who can tend to get obsessive if things don't go her way, and I'm assuming that she's going to try and follow us. I talked to a lawyer friend about trying to get a restraining order to stop her from doing that before it even gets started. Thanks for the good wishes and happy holidays. As for whether my mom has seen the comments, according to Hannah, she's read a lot of them and doesn't think strangers on Reddit have the right to call her a bad person. LOL. Honestly, I don't think there is any way of fixing things with her. I just wish them the best, but as far away from me and my family as possible.